In 1863, there is newspaper coverage of a black man who had served as a hangman in Gibraltar and was jailed in Plymouth for resisting a policeman who approached him when leaning against a shop window. The case is reported humorously, as though the man himself is a living stereotype. John Thomas, alias Little Jack, an African as black as your hat, and whose features formed a strange contrast with a white smock frock which he had on, was charged with assaulting the police in the execution of their duty on the previous evening. P.C. Will stated that on the previous evening he was on duty in 4th Street and saw him leaning against a shop window. He told him to go on, but he would not do so. The constable then put his hand upon his shoulder to force him on, when the defendant struck him in the face. He was taken into custody and locked up. The defendant was intoxicated and greatly resisted the police. The defendant, in defence, contended that the policeman had first assaulted him and he did not obstruct the policeman in the execution of his duty. Mr. Superintendent Lynn stated that some time ago he was at Gibraltar, in prison, there for stabbing a soldier in the back. A man having to be hung there, the defendant obtained his liberty by officiating as hangman, and then came to England. He said he had claimed of £20 on the government and was endeavouring to get it, but had no prospect of succeeding. He came to Devonport and tried to get on board HMS London, but they would not accept him, and he is now lurking about the streets of this town. The bench sentenced him to 14 days' imprisonment.
14 days?
Yes.
Very well, I don't care. Here I goes, off to the land of Dixie.
There was loud laughter in the court.
Here is a story of a man, travelling from London, who ends up in the Devonport workhouse in 1863. Unsatisfied with what is provided him in the workhouse, he destroys his clothes in the hope of being given better. He is then sent to prison. On his release, he repeats his behaviour. Andrew Wilson, a man between 30 and 40 years of age, and of very disreputable and ragged appearance, was charged with tearing up his clothes by Mr. Griselier, governor of Devonport workhouse. The governor stated that on the previous morning he was informed that the defendant, who had been taken into the house the day before as a vagrant, had torn up his clothes. He went to him in his ward and saw his clothes in a bundle of rags, and the prisoner lying in the bed covered with some rugs. He asked the defendant what he had torn up his clothes for, and he said he had torn them up because they would not last 2 days longer. The bench. Why did you tear up your clothes? The defendant. Because I wished to get better. The defendant said he had left London, where he belonged, to seek for work, which he had been unable to get through ill health. The bench sentenced him to prison for 7 days.